Let's get one thing straight. Medieval castles were not cozy fairy tale homes. They were giant stone refrigerators. Not the kind of cold where you just grab a blanket, but the kind of cold where you can literally see your breath swirling in front of your face, inside your own room. These were fortresses designed to withstand sieges, not to comfort the people who had to live inside them. There were no radiators, no chimneys in most places until centuries later, no thick glass windows to keep the heat in. Just stone, wind, and endless drafts that crept into every corner. And yet, somehow people managed to survive inside. The real question is, how? When we imagine medieval castles, we think of roaring fires, golden candlelight dancing across rich tapestries, nobles feasting in great halls, and ladies in fur-lined robes laughing by the fire. But the truth was far darker. At night, those same halls became freezing caverns, echoing with the sound of wind scraping through cracks in the walls. Behind those beautiful stone walls was an environment harsher than many winter forests. Sleeping in a medieval castle wasn't romantic. It was survival. The core problem was stone. Castles were made of it because it was strong, fireproof, and resistant to attack. But stone is one of the worst insulators known to man. It doesn't just get cold, it stores cold. Once those thick walls froze in the winter, they held on to the chill for days. A fire might give you warmth for a while, but the moment it died, the stone would suck that warmth back into itself. Imagine sleeping inside a freezer made of rock and you're close to the truth. The architecture made things worse. Great halls were massive open chambers with high ceilings where heat rose out of reach. Bedrooms were often tucked high in towers, where the wind howled through arrow slits and poorly fitted shutters. Spiral staircases acted like funnels, carrying icy drafts straight into sleeping quarters. Even the courtyards in the middle of castles acted like giant wind traps, letting cold air pour into the very heart of the fortress. No matter where you turned, the cold was waiting. The closest thing to heating was the hearth, a big stone fireplace, or for poorer folks, a simple pit in the ground with a small fire. But these were horribly inefficient. Before the 12th century there were no chimneys. Smoke filled the air, choking everyone in the room. Walls turned black with soot, clothes stank of fire, and lungs burned with every breath. People lit these fires because they had no choice, but they only provided a bubble of warmth in the immediate area. Beyond that, the cold ruled supreme. If you were wealthy, you had a few more tricks. Servants would prepare the bedchamber hours in advance. They would heat stones in the fire until they were nearly glowing, then wrap them in cloth and tuck them between the sheets to pre-warm the bed. They poured boiling water into ceramic jars or metal flasks, wrapping them in linen as makeshift hot water bottles. Braziers, large bowls of hot coals, glowed faintly in the corner, giving off a little heat but also the constant danger of fire. A tipped brazier could turn an entire chamber into an inferno. Even worse, poor ventilation meant carbon monoxide poisoning was a very real risk. People didn't just die of cold in castles. Sometimes they died of the heat sources meant to save them. But the real secret weapon of the medieval bedroom was the four-poster bed with heavy curtains. These were not decorative. They were survival machines. Imagine a small tent built inside your freezing stone room. You and your family climbed in, drew the curtains tight, and created a cocoon of warmth that trapped your body heat. Inside, it was marginally warmer. Outside, the room was still an icebox. Families often slept together for warmth, noble children with siblings, servants with other servants. Privacy didn't matter. What mattered was body heat. You curled into a ball, knees tucked to your chest, sharing warmth with whoever was beside you. It wasn't comfort. It was containment. And once you were in bed, you stayed there until daylight. Getting out in the middle of the night meant facing a wall of cold that could chill you to the bone in seconds. Servants were essential to this fight against the cold. They didn't just prepare the rooms, they stayed awake through the night. Some sat quietly in the corner, ready to add coals to the brazier or fetch another blanket at a moment's notice. Others dozed upright in chairs, waking at the slightest stir from their lord. In some noble households, servants rotated through the night, tending fires, checking on children, even warming stools or boots so that the master would never feel the full bite of the winter air. The comfort of a single noble often depended on the exhausting, unseen work of 3 or 4 people who barely slept at all. And here's the great irony. Nobles with all their wealth didn't always have it better. Their rooms were often in the upper levels of towers, far away from the earth's natural insulation, battered by wind on all sides. Large windows, symbols of wealth and status, were nothing but giant holes covered by shutters or thin oiled cloth. They looked impressive, but they let in the cold like knives. Meanwhile, peasants often slept closer to the kitchens or in the cellars, where the heat of the day lingered a little longer. Some even curled up in barns beside animals, because the body heat of a cow or sheep was sometimes more reliable than a nobleman's brazier. Cold did not respect social class. It found everyone high and low alike. The true sufferers, though, were the guards and watchmen. While nobles huddled in curtained beds and servants curled near kitchen fires, the night guards stood on the ramparts, exposed to the cutting wind. They wrapped themselves in whatever wool they could find, paced back and forth, stamped their feet, and whispered prayers to keep themselves awake. Some chewed strong herbs to stay alert. Others carried hot stones or sipped from flasks of spiced wine, not to warm themselves, but to dull the edge of the cold long enough to survive another hour. If a guard fell asleep, the punishment could be swift and brutal. For them, the cold wasn't just uncomfortable, it was life-threatening, both from nature and from their own commanders. So how did people survive medieval winters in castles? The truth is, they barely did. They smoked their lungs with open fires, burned their skin on hot stones, curled up together like animals and prayed for the sun to rise. They layered wool upon wool, clung to traditions, and passed down survival tricks generation after generation. And still people died every winter. Coughs turned to fevers, frail bodies gave out, and cold claimed lives year after year. But the survivors endured because that is what humans do. They adapt. They build curtains around beds. They sleep beside livestock. They invent clever little tricks like warming stones or boiling spiced wine. And they pass these tricks along one freezing night at a time. So the next time you complain that your room is a little too cold, or you reach for the thermostat to raise the temperature by a few degrees, remember this. Somewhere in the past, someone your age was curled under a pile of rough wool blankets, breathing smoke-filled air, teeth chattering, whispering prayers, and hoping desperately that morning would come.